Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 610. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge. I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the Duke of you-know, the Sultan of Strategery, the indestructible, bridge-defying, is baffled that the Batman Bridgeman crossover was cut from the most recent hardcover, and he's, of course, the elder statesman of the podcast, Segulin.
How's it going, eh?
Jim, on this episode, we're going to be talking about Batman the World. It's a big, meaty tome, and we're going to be talking about every story, going through our reactions to each one, what we really felt about this particular exploration. We also have a listener voicemail from friend of the show, Russell. Sponsoring us, as always, is DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what is going on over at DCBService.com?
It's a good time to be a Robin fan, man. We have the Robin Annual, which is continuing on the great the great series, ongoing by Joshua Williamson. But we have a 3-issue limited series, parts 1 and 2, written by Jeff Lemire, Robin and Batman, which tells a nice, cool, classic Dick Grayson Robin story. But we also have a 6-issue limited series written by Tim Seeley, Robins, which has all 5 of the previous Robins meeting a person who claims to be the first true Robin. So it's going to be a really cool series. All of those 40% off. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, we've got Batman Little Gotham Calendar Days. This is a $9.99 trade paperback, 42% off, only $5.79. Little Gotham is amazing. I love Little Gotham, so I want to shout this one out because it's a very cool, and it's one that, for some strange reason, was not on my radar. I think, and I'm glad that I'm shouting it out here because it's such a great series. Birds of Prey, Fighters by Trade paperback. If you've been a longtime listener of the show, this is on our short list as favorite comic book series of all time. $24.99 regularly, 42% off, only $14.49. This is your chance to see why in these collected editions. So I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for continuing to support the show. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk Batman the World.
Through the magic alchemy of nature's most awesome sources of energy, Ray Palmer, atomic physicist, becomes the Atom.
So, Jim, one of these special pieces came out, and it's something, growing up, I always loved about comics is when we started getting these original hardcover offerings. And they were always creative and this showcase of art. And obviously, Batman's been a figure that's been central to getting this type of quality treatment. This one's unique. It's Batman the World, where every story is from a different corner of the world and very representative of that. I didn't know what to expect from the stories, like, what countries were going to be represented. I just knew that this was coming and was really excited to do this. I also didn't know how they were releasing it. This was day and date released as a hardcover, released digitally as, as a purchase, and released on the app, which is a unique approach. It's kind of like this streaming thing right now where we're getting films released in theaters and we're getting them on the streaming service day and date, which was an interesting sort of piece. So I guess my first question goes to, how did you initially read this? Like, what vehicle did you use to read this? And then what did you think about it? Just general.
Well, first off, it was neat because I'll start with, I love this. This was absolutely wonderful. I thought when I was reading about what this was, I thought this was going to be different versions of Batman. Like a French Batman, a Spanish Batman, an Italian Batman. I didn't think it was going to be Batman in these different countries. So for me, I was like, oh, that should be kind of interesting. It went from being kind of interesting to being really awesome because it was our Batman globally. It wasn't just, variations of him or Elseworld stories. All these things could have taken place modern day, and that was something I really loved. Now, I got it through, digitally, and so I'm reading it through on iZilla, but I also have the printed hardcover copy, so I got it both ways, but I haven't read the hardcover yet because I'm just getting ready for the show. And I like to have it on the iZilla right in front of me as we're talking. But yeah, this was something that I absolutely loved, and it exceeded what I thought it was going to be. And that's something like, you get expectations on a book, and you're like, sometimes like, it doesn't meet up. No, this one exceeded it. And it's funny because I'm sitting there looking at all the different stories, trying to figure out which story is my favorite. And there are no stories that I would call bad. So every single one of them I thought was really good. Mm-hmm. And then I've got to pick, if I could, you twist my arm and what's maybe my favorite, that's a tough call because, you got the opening in the U.S., which was an amazing story. I loved the France one and the German one. Those were probably my top three, but again, every one was good. So it's kind of like this is like one of those really fun reads that every single one, there's not a I'll just skip through that one story. Every single one was read and then reread again and go, oh wow, I didn't notice that. That's cool. The little extra stuff, and then just the personal touches that the different creative teams. And it's, again, I'm always writer focused, but with this one, art played a really heavy, play into enjoyment on it. So again, I love how we had different art styles, different creative, different little tweaks, but it is still Batman.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this was the anthology style and the fact that they weren't beholden to this being one big story. Like, I liked that each one was its own unique tale. They could tell a story of Bruce Wayne that was very unique. I didn't know, are we going to get different kinds of Batman? What are we going to get in this? And we kind of do get different kinds of Batman because we're getting different takes on Batman, but and different eras of Batman, clearly. In how this is, artists were able to pull from clearly their favorite era and favorite supporting cast for Batman and bring them in. I was geeking out at the amount we do see Alfred in this because I love him. But also there's appearances by other members of the Bat family as it makes sense to the particular tale that's being told. And I enjoyed that as well. I've always enjoyed the jet-setting Batman, the idea that this is the Dark Knight detective, the swashbuckling superhero. I grew up with that Batman, and it works today. It's been very current. It was brought back in during Batman Inc. So when you were saying, hey, when will be getting those, I was wondering too, and that's where question I was going to ask you is, were you thinking this was going to have some Batman Inc. style elements to them? I actually liked walking into this and feeling like I read it multiple times. I found that, to your point about favorite stories, my favorite story shifted at each read through because of the fact that I think they're so different in tone and presentation that I think your mood can really designate what's your favorite at any particular given point in time. Because you're right, there's not a bad story in the batch. And they are very, very different. So there's ones that are clear favorites. I mean, you could start off with the first one where they're going to talk about the United States one where we're talking. I mean, it's Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermeo. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and both just like nodding over the fact that that's a great way to kick this bad boy off. But all the way through, I found each story engaging. I liked that none of them felt cookie cutter. So you're pulled through this thing. And you can read it in a variety of different ways, where I did have one read through where I read it in 2 sittings. And I mean, when I say 2 sittings, they were pretty close together. And I had another read through where I was reading it in chunks along the way. And this reads really well no matter what, because each story has this great beginning, middle, and ending. And they also didn't skimp on the page count for them. Like, I felt like the stories were not like this 2 to 3 page thing where, you're like, geez, I wanted more. They gave enough substance to these stories. They're little short stories. They start on Disney Plus right now. They have this thing running called Star Wars Visions, where they're like these 14-minute little stories, but they're meaty. And it's kind of like this, where each one is a different animation team, different art, different writers and everything that are putting together these little stories that have some substance and depth to them, and it's their take on Star Wars. Well, this has that flavor, And I love it. I really like this presentation. I'm wondering how they're tracking, like, so you got the people that have DC Infinite that are reading this. And maybe they didn't buy the hardcover. They didn't buy Comixology-wise on this one. I wonder how they're tracking the success of this. Because, obviously you got to be tracking the people. Did you read this? Okay, so when you said you read it on iZilla, was it on DC Infinite or did you buy it on Comixology?
No, I bought it on Comixology.
So did I, yeah. So and I was figuring you did. So it's interesting. I forgot the day and date that it would have been on DC Infinite. Would that have influenced your buying decision?
No. I probably would have been neat to read it on the Infinite, but I 100% was ready to have this thing bought, and have it on iZilla. Because again, I'd love having the actual physical copy because I did buy that. I will someday sit down with it because I like sometimes to sit down with the book and you feel the pages turn, you hear that rustle of the page turn, and there are certain stories that I enjoy that. But keeping it on iZilla, if next week I feel like reading it again, boom, I just grab iZilla and read it again. So I like for the show having it handy, but also for the reread again, and it's downloaded it's downloaded and ready to go right now, and it'll stay that way for a while now.
Here's the thing. This one for me, make it absolute. I'll buy it instantly. I mean, I know it'll be like a smaller absolute, kind of like a Killing Joke kind of presentation, but I'm fine with that. Release this as an absolute. This one is like itching to be an absolute edition. The different art styles and everything that are in it, I would love to see this blown up a bit. It's one of the things that I do love about reading these, because I've got the hardcover too, like you, and I have it in Comixology. One thing I do like about Comixology is the ability to zoom in, and you get this on the DC Universe Infinite app too. So I applaud them for releasing it on DC Universe Infinite because I know multiple people right now who that's like their subscription service. And, that's the way that they're reading comics right now. And I want that to be successful because I do think there is a market for that is unique. So I'm glad to see that they're taking certain products. They're doing it with Milestone. They're doing it with this, where they're like day and date. Let's plop this out on there. It's an important work. Let's really own it and put it out on that platform. I like that choice a great deal. It didn't influence my decision in the slightest. I'm like, oh, great, it's on there. Cool, I'll buy it and have it that way. I'm still one that's the collector's mentality. The digital collection, I like to own it as well too. So but I appreciate the fact that they're taking something unique like this that would generate some buzz and making it available to a larger audience by putting it on DC Universe Infinite. I don't know what those subscription numbers look like for DC Universe Infinite, but I hope this is something that would get somebody maybe to try out that service if they aren't already on it, because this is a special piece. This really is a special piece of work.
Oh, big time. And I'm echoing exactly what you said about Absolute, or if they were to decide to do, hey, let's do Batman the World Part 2. I'm like, yes, I'm 100% in on it because, again, they really showed how cool this story would be. And again, I love this opening one, the U.S. one. Again, Azrael Bermeo, come on. It's right there. That's a can-do, no-miss situation. But just the premise behind this story, this is Batman doing a declaration of war to the world, basically telling them, no matter where you are, I'm going to be there. It's, I'm Gotham City. Everybody knows me as Gotham City, but guess what? Every city is Gotham now. And I love just that kind of that notion, that statement. And the fact that, as you're reading the story, and then you later find out this is what Batman wrote, posted on the dark web as a warning to everyone. That for me was like, oh, and we do multiple read-throughs. I'll tell you right now, when I did my first read-through and I saw the ending, I went back and I immediately reread it because, knowing what it was going into that, I was like, oh, that is just such an awesome declaration because in there, he basically does tell his origin, and they had the beautiful artwork matching it, but he doesn't give any details that would let people know who he is.
Correct.
So again, it's one of those carefully worded placings that we as the fans know exactly what he's talking about. But if I was a crook reading that, I'd be like, oh crud, Batman's expanding. I always joke around saying if I was a villain, I'd never be in Gotham or Metropolis. You would never catch me doing anything illegal in those two cities because of Batman and Superman. Well, now guess what? It doesn't matter where you are, he will still find you. And I love that declaration.
Dialogue is really critical. And one of the things that I really loved about this is you have these beautiful, beautiful pieces from Lee Bermeo. Brian Azzarello's writing, just going through each page. And it just totally adds to this sense of Gotham as a world. There's like two stories going on here where you're seeing like snapshots at Batman and what he's been through a career and how he's evolved and how he views the city. And I really love that. And then you get that shot where you see all the scars, as Alfred's talking to him. I've always liked the idea that Batman, it reminds you of the humanity of Batman, and in some ways makes him seem stronger when you see him with all those scars and the fact that he keeps fighting. He keeps going on. He keeps improving himself and what he does, and relentlessly never stops. It's something I really enjoy about that. And you get all of that without it necessarily being part of the dialogue. It's done subtly through the art, where you're just like, whew. I took the opening cover of this Batman on top of the globe, and I took a screenshot on the iPad, and that's my Apple Watch background now. So
nice,
that's my watch face. And it's a neat thing to do, and I'm referencing it just for people out there. That's kind of the cool thing about these digital versions is that you can do that and put it on there and, have that personalization of this is something I bought and I'm reading right now that I just really, really was taken by. And it's nice. I did that originally with the Detective 27 cover and plopped that on. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'd like to change it up right now. And I'm like, oh, that cover's really neat. And so I did that this time around. And I think I'm going to do this more often where I just kind of, based on a work that I'm particularly enjoying, swap out the Apple Watch face. You can also have it rotate, like where you can put multiple images. I have it, I kind of like right now I like a static watch face. So I have that as my static one, but I could see myself down the road maybe having a couple that rotate that I'm really enjoying as well. But it was kind of a cool piece. The detail in Bermeo's art, and it's something that I really appreciate. When you see veins, when you see muscle work, when you see details on like the texture of the belt, and there's just, even skin, when you look at like Alfred's skin and you see like, clear age, not just age lines, but age markings on the face. It's gorgeous. It adds this sense of this is alive. This page is alive. And I love artwork because you get to see with each different artist different focuses and different levels of detail. And this is, if you're an art fan, you mentioned writing, and I'm with you. I think the balance of comics to me is always the joy of terrific writing mixed with terrific art. And I think this has such a nice balance of both that this is a page turner. This is a coffee table book. That's why I want it in absolute. I want this on my coffee table with like extras. Like, I don't know what else you put in this. Maybe some stories behind it or something. I don't know. I could see this particular work having some legs to it and being released in different types of volumes that are complementary to the caliber of the work that it is. Very unique idea.
Yeah. Oh, and I tell you, the penguin fight sequence, that page is just so absolutely beautiful. I so love this. One that looks on the etchings on their face, just that determination and just that raw rage, but also the bat costume. I love how on the arms he's kind of got the, you can clearly see plating, and then you can see the elastic stuff to help with the muscle expansion as he needs it. But on Penguin's umbrella, and I've never seen this before, so I'm absolutely loving the fact that there is the ejection port for where the shell will come out. Like with a firearm, you have to, especially an automatic, when you fire it, the spent casing comes flying out the side of the gun. Well, I've never seen an ejection port drawn in on a Penguin umbrella before. And I'm like, that is sweet little detail in there. Yeah. I was like, that is cool.
Yeah, and it's something where you can also go, the Penguin would be evolving his tech over time. Yeah. So you can see how an artist can really have fun with playing around with what that should look like. I love the Bane sequence where you got to see that because there's a viciousness to it. Nightfall is a story that will always have a place near and dear to my heart because it was around this time we were getting a lot of X-Men epics. You get like the yearly big like X-Men epic. And we got this long-form Batman story that I remember the previews, the Diamond Previews catalog that was released with the image of Asbats. And part of me thought they were swerving us and that was going to be Bruce. Like something was happening to Bruce and Bruce was going to be the one in that new costume. Like that was going to be, we took down Batman and Bruce, for whatever happened to him, needed to use the new suit to be back in business. I didn't realize they were really going all in with it being Jean-Paul Valley. Is it Jean Paul or John Paul? I don't know. But which is sad because I love the character of Azrael. When they put him in the suit, I was like, wow. And I really tried as a fan. I'm a Batman fan, to be all in on Asbats. Like, you would see these glimpses where he was so violent, and then he'd have these interactions with Robin where he was almost apologetic, like you were getting that they were going to become a team and kind of work together, and it didn't ultimately go that way. He headed further down his path, but there were points in time during Night Quest that I was rooting for him. I'm like, okay, I want this to work. Because the whole premise was, okay, you want a more Punisher-like Batman? Well, we'll give you one. Yeah. Let's see if you really want that. I remember when Night Quest, the search started, and we got Bruce back. And it's funny how just seeing this image, took me back to all that emotion because of how brutal Bane was. That story was epic because you got to see Bruce in this wheelchair, being still the detective and doing all these pieces. And this brought back all that emotion. The Man-Bat story took me back to 70s books on record. That I had with Man-Bat, because the Man-Bat stories back then with him versus Kurt and Francine, well, not really versus Kurt and Francine, but Kurt and Francine were involved. You got to see this great Man-Bat story. I loved the jump from era to era, including his love interests.
Yeah.
And how that made him realize it wasn't him that was outgrowing Gotham, but maybe in some ways that Gotham was outgrowing him. and that idea of, what drives him. The piece is just, I've never seen, it's funny how after all these years, there's still more layers of Batman to explore, more to explain, more to kind of figure out on the psychology of Batman. This really did a nice job with that in a piece that really was appropriate to opening this up, because I felt like at the end, I'm like, wow. Well, that got me thinking. and I love stories like that with Batman and Marvels. I've read a lot of Batman in my life, and they still find this way to give me a story that makes me process the character in a unique way and think about what his relationship is with Gotham. Because you always reference how Gotham's a character. That embraced not only Gotham being a character, but how much Bruce's character is tied into that character.
Yeah.
And really, really well done.
Oh, big time.
So then we jump to Paris, France. And, of course, when you're going to do that, you're going to go to museums and that whole concept. And you get this really terrific Batman Catwoman story that I wasn't sure where it was going to go. It was all about art pieces, and you get to see them. And I'm like, if they had just left this a museum romp, where they were just kind of, chasing each other around the museum with some kind of conclusion to it, it would have been great. The fact that it turns into this story with Wonder Woman being there, and that Catwoman really didn't care about the artwork at all. She just wanted to get at the magic lasso to get some real answers to her ultimate question about, dude,
I love this story for that. And that was one of the things, with you, I'm watching this, and it's the little dance back and forth between them. And again, I was like, okay, this is kind of neat. But once Wonder Woman came into play. I was like, why is she going? Why does she want to go up against Wonder Woman? What the heck? And once I saw what she was after, she wasn't after stealing the lasso.
Nope.
She wanted to wrap Bruce in the lasso, and I loved that. This for me was an absolute wonderful story.
The Spain story kicks into place afterwards, and this was another fun one because Bruce is beat up, and you can see why Alfred's like, listen, you need to take some time off and really leave Batman there. It actually is very complimentary to the Libre Mayo piece where you see all those scars. We're seeing a Batman I don't know what he'd been through leading up to that, nor does that matter. This is Bruce trying to do what he promised to Alfred, just get away for a day and kind of relax and do all that. And he does it. And you see this is an aging Bruce where, he's taken some time. He's actually on this trip trying to do that, but he gets pulled back in. He can't escape the fact that he's Batman and wants to be Batman, needs to get out there. And I love that Alfred calls up at the end and he goes, Master Bruce, I hope I'm not waking you up. I'm here in Gotham. It's 8 p.m. I was doing some cleaning in your dressing room. I seem to be missing your night suit. I just loved the dialogue. And that relationship between him and Alfred is so iconic. And you could just see that dialogue happening. And boy, did they nail this piece. And when you saw him out there, there's a smile on his face.
Yes.
When he's, getting ready to jump and swing through the night. And it was such a neat art piece. I loved that it showed an aging Batman where we see, Batman fighting the same metabolism issues that we face as we get older. Yes. And he's still going at it. He's still driven and still driven to be Batman. And I really loved the take on it. Again, these are not stuck to a particular era. They can take place at various times in Batman's career. And I love that this kind of embraced that. And honestly, various continuities that Batman's been through.
Yes.
So, I don't know where you place this in continuity. I don't really care.
No. And again, that's one of the neat things about this. This very easily could be our Bruce. It could be any other time. And that was kind of a neat story. But I also like the fact that this really was dominant on art. It was the images that was really telling the story. Yeah, we have the dialogue kind of, going along that was, actually audio from Alfred the whole time. But, it was a heavy art focus. You had to really see the story being told, really see what Bruce was trying to relax. Bruce was trying to be Bruce Wayne. He was actually even succeeding a little bit. I love the fact that he's got fast food. He's chowing on some fast food, which he probably normally doesn't do. He's lounging at the beach kind of stuff. There was some neat moments in there that I liked seeing just kind of Bruce let go a little bit. And he did this for a couple days even, maybe even a full week. But in the end there, it's that moment when he pulls out his family photo and he looks at his family. He's got all the beer and the booze and all that stuff in the fridge. He dumps that all out, or drinks a lot of it, I think, wakes up, and it's time to go back to work. Time to be Batman. I thought that, for me, was just a really cool moment.
When we get in the Italy piece, I've got to say something before we actually talk about the Batman story. I loved, and I urge you to do this if you didn't do it, go through and read the background of each creator that's on there, because for me, these are writers and artists and colorists, and, the whole creative team. A lot of them are people that are new to me. I've likely read or seen them in something before, but I don't know always. But they also share, and I love this. I enjoyed this story a great deal. So one of the things these three worked on was this thing called Dylan Dog, and obviously it's something that's an important piece in Italy. I don't know what it is. So I'm seeking this out now. I want to know what we're talking about here. What is this comic? I like that they give just this nice little biography of who each of these creators are. Gives me a chance to get to know something I didn't know before. And I am a big fan of comics in general, so it's fun to like get exposed to something new. And the colorists had done the sequel, the Italian sequel to James O'Barr's The Crow, which I love The Crow. I mean, The Crow was when The Crow came out in theaters, I was big into the Crow comics from the movie. The movie drew me back to this comic series that I didn't read, and then I went back and actually read the comic work, and then for a time was reading the sequels that were either had been published or were gradually coming out, and really enjoyed kind of delving into that world through another medium. I love when stuff like this points me back at books either that I've been exposed to in the past or new things that I haven't. So I'm actually looking at some of their back catalog, some of these creators, trying to seek it out, and hoping there's English language versions of these things so that way I can see them and enjoy them, and see what's going on with them. But this was a cool story. I liked this idea that this is kind of a different take on the Batman and Robin story, where it's Batman, because he was an quote-unquote orphan himself, is prone to try and help out in those situations and be an influence and a guide. It doesn't always go right. It's not just when it's Jason Todd.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of where the advice he gave just went wrong. And, he's apologetic of it. And I really enjoyed seeing this story where this was him trying to prevent something from happening with somebody else who had a very similar kind of story to his. And you see where, he kind of saves the day and tries to be a positive influence. And I really liked this story. I also want to comment on the artwork. The artwork has an Italian style to it in its presentation, if I'm making any sense at all. And I really loved that. This is something where I would love to see this creative team do a longer form detective story, because this style, it's a lot of what I loved about things like Long Halloween in tone and presentation, if I'm making any sense. And I'm looking at this and being like, this would make for a great, this team on a long form Batman mystery would be a lot of fun. So yeah. I'm hoping that some of the creative teams in this isn't the last we're going to see of them doing this type of work. Some of them I'd love to see again in a longer form story where they get a chance to really, not in continuity, or can be in continuity. I'm fine with them doing a Curse of the White Knight kind of thing where they're like, let's not worry about any of that. Let's just tell a really good Batman story, and release an original graphic novel, original hardcover, whatever, longer form. Give us something like this, because I really liked the art on this, and its uniqueness to everything else in this. That's the thing that really made it a page turner, because the moments with the kid where he's talking to him, you see a lot of emotion being delivered with this kid, and I really enjoyed the level of detail on his face. You get this idea of who this kid is and how over time, as he's matured, what has happened to him has influenced him. And his misunderstanding of what Batman was trying to teach him is really prevalent. It's where Batman sometimes, and anybody can, just got it wrong. And it was an interesting sort of piece. And Bruce even saying things like, how do you manage to close your eyes at night? And he's like, not thinking about the past helps me to sleep. And this idea of, the past being something where it can eat you up and you have trouble letting it go. And I think we've all been there at various times. I know I have. There's been times in my life where I haven't been able to let go of things. And I've learned that, where it's like, okay, you need to know when to say when. And I think this kid hasn't hit that, when to say when. And it's interesting when you read this story. It was a really cool story. And how just that leads to this thing that's horribly wrong, where, Bruce is almost at the point where he's trying to apologize and reason with this kid, but the kid's not giving up the fight, because he is buying time for Batman to get stabbed in the back.
Yes. And I'll tell you, I loved this story. As you, I was right along with it. And I liked how we did do the little time jump where you see the villain now and you see how the villain was born. And as you said, it was a a Robin situation gone wrong. Mm-hmm. And it's, sometimes Bruce can't save them all. And that is one of the hardest things that Bruce has to deal with. And this is somebody he tried to steer, and it just didn't work. And it's in a way, it's good to see him fail. I hate for that to happen, but it does add to that human side of him. He is going to make these situations where he has no pass on it. He can't solve this kid's problems for him. It's got to be on the kid. He's got to do it. And now, not as a kid anymore, he's more of an adult now. But it's one of those things where I loved seeing that, where now it always doesn't have a happy ending. Everything worked out fine. And this was, again, one of those beautiful stories that, I really enjoyed how this was how it looked, and what was done in the story. I truly enjoyed this one.
The next one is that Germany story. And before we get to that page where you see like the opening art, that is really beautiful. Batman in the snow with the creatures above him.
Yes.
I would never have guessed this was going to be a Joker story.
Nope.
And I loved how it was and why it was, because it's kind of the Joker's own statement on, all right, you got your own craziness going on in the U.S. Yeah. I'm going to come over here, and there's something intriguing about what you're doing here. And, I want to mess around. I'm not from around here, but I can really shake things up here and make some noise in a very, very different way. And that's what the Joker's all about, this being U.S. has already got the chaos that I was trying to create. So I'm going to come over here and kind of mess around because it's more fun. And you get this idea with him. I also loved that there was a real artistic interpretation of the Joker here, where it's clearly him, but it's kind of like this amalgamation of a comic book Joker, a film Joker, and something else. Like it's their own little take on the Joker. I'm finding more and more that I'm comfortable with artists kind of showing how this guy presents himself differently, and he's been through different things that would present himself uniquely. This is a really cool take on the Joker, and how the idea of ethics comes into this, where you've got these two crusaders who are like, one of them's like, hey, I'm drawing the line here. I'm not killing anybody. I have my principles. And you got this girl who's like, I don't know that I have the same I think my cause is more important to me than these kind of principles you're talking about here. Life and death. I don't know. I don't think he deserves to live. And I'm going to kind of play off of that piece. So it's an interesting sort of scenario here where Batman is so focused. I don't know that Batman would have left if he thought that this was going to go where it was going to go. I think he was so focused on getting the Joker out of there, and thought that by stopping the initial bomb, he didn't realize that the Joker left the real joke being that there was a second bomb.
Yep.
And I loved this story because of the fact that it had that little piece to it. And it was artistically, this is a very beautiful piece. The idea of this taking place in the snowfall and the Joker's henchmen being these, having these different kind of masks and being more appropriate to the environment. I see the Joker having a lot of fun like that in a different place. And it totally felt like a natural Batman story in Germany, where both of these characters were kind of embracing the world that they were in. I really liked the depth of this story. Beautiful piece.
Oh, God, yeah. And I'll tell you, I love the fact that truly this is a Joker story. I think that was one of the neat things for me, because I love Joker's rationale that he's like, hey, I'm done with Gotham. We're talking about Batman branching out. Why doesn't the Joker? Germany is a great place for him. And I love how he goes in there. He's like, he didn't even have any bodyguards. I love this place. He's used to having to deal with a small army to get to his target. No, he found it. And it was funny because as the one guy was saying, no, I've got my principles counting me out. He's like, Reinhardt has his principles. Pew, bam, But the other, his other partner, I'm like, that was kind of a neat little twist. This one, she had the green hair, and it was funny because I didn't realize what was going to happen, but they kind of gave us some really good indicators. And even like the one time when Joker is right in her face, he's like, these wounded eyes, this abyss within have much in common. You should stop taking your pills. it will free you. And as he's holding her, he's smearing her lipstick, and it's making kind of a little Joker face. And I was like, oh my God. And there's something in the art read through that I did that I started really noticing it and talking about how the Germans need a Joker. And he just created the Joker with her. And I was like, oh my God, we've got a German Joker. And I immediately wanted to have part 2 of this story. I want to see that, her turn into a female Joker, her turn into the German Joker, and see what she would do. And they immediately started thinking off page how this team could actually create another continuing story. And even after I was done with Batman the World, I would have loved, this is one of the main stories where I would have loved to have seen Batman the World Part 2, where all of these creative teams continue on their story, especially this one. This is the one where I'm like, this story needs a part 2. I would love to see where she goes from here.
Or this being in a Legends of the Dark Knight kind of thing, where they give a few issues, to kind of really take off with this storyline.
God, yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'd love to see more of her.
Yep.
She, again, is, in a couple pages, they've just created a character that I want to read again.
And I want to see this creative team do it, because I want the art. I want the writing. I want the art. I think there's something visually to this that I just would love to see a further exploration of this. And I love that about this, that I think each story leaves you in a different place of what you want moving forward and how you would. And I think it's a testament to the creative team, because I felt like each one, there was this like flavor of some kind of emotion that I was left with at the end, of like wanting more, or wanting them to do something else, or wanting to see what they've done before, and it was unique, I think, to each story. I think you're laying this out perfectly. This one, I'm with you. I want more of this. What happens next? Like there's got to be a next page with her, because she's not going to be done. I mean, once you do that, once you make that choice, you're not done. That has now sent you down a path. I want to see where that path leads for her. So it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So the Czech Republic piece was interesting, because one of the things I love about Batman, and I've always loved about Batman over time, is Batman really can tell any kind of story. This is like sci-fi, telepathy. This is X-Men kind of stuff, where you've got like this guy who's really a telepath. Well, that's not enough. What happens when you gather a bunch of them together and basically amplify all of that? And there's a goal here. You got this great detective story, though, with a supernatural component to it. And this is something I've always dug about Batman, is when you bring this in, and Batman's dealing with a world that these are people with superpowers. And these psychics being like chained, I mean, it's horrid. They're horrifying. They're all chained up to this machine and clearly in pain. In how they're being used as this like super battery in there. And I was glad that they set that up as horrific, because scientific experimentation on people should be something, when you do stuff like this, always should appear monstrous. And I love when they do that. I mean, the color tone choice of this all being red, I think was a really, really smart choice, because that added to the terror of an agony that these people were clearly going through. And clearly, I don't know if you unhook them from the machine, if they'll ever be the same again, because some of them look almost mindless in what's being done. They clearly are part of a battery.
Yeah. Well, and even at the end of it, when he does free them, and you just see, the couple pages they show, they're deeply affected by this.
Yes.
And you can in it, and that was something that I absolutely loved to, as you said, it's how they showed the horrific nature of what was being done to them. This was beyond just any type of freakish kind of this experiment. This was like just ripping the brain inside out. And that is, again, one of those fears that I think we all kind of have, is just the monstrous experiments. It's that horrific human nature kind of thing that just an ingrown fear in all of us, and that's one of the things why zombie movies and things like that just have such a deep effect on people. It's not just seeing someone rip a human apart; it's just that you can turn into that, and you can become that, and just what happens then. It's I love seeing this. This was a great kind of epic thing, but I loved how the art styles, using the coloring, shifted. We had 1984 height peak of the Cold War Batman riding in there, and the coloring pattern, it just was that classic kind of Batman look to it, And then as it shifts, into the science stuff, you get the horrific, and even Batman says, "Oh no!" When you can get Batman saying, "Whoa," that's something significant. It really added to just the piece itself.
Okay, maybe Batman is stronger than Bobek. That was just a great ending, because then you get to see the typical gargoyle sequence over there, which was, I love that every artist, it looks a little different the way that they do it, and it was a really good piece. This is one I have trouble saying something is one of my favorite pieces, because I think for me what I loved the most about this, if you were to say as a collected piece, I loved the sheer variety and how good everyone was. This one was endearing because it was so different, this idea of my Batman.
Yes.
And it was this artist and his friends who learned about this legend of Batman. And they all had their interpretation of what this Batman really was. One thought he was a knight, because of his cape. The other thought that he loved animals, and he was a vet living in Australia, treating sick animals. Batman was a traveler to the stars. And the other one got the idea that Batman helped the artist actually had this idea of Batman helping people. It actually nailed it in many ways in what he does. But this all spun off of this Batman pen that he got. And never, he was crafting stories of Batman, but not really realizing that, wait a minute, you mean he really exists? And, okay, so who is he? And the papers were, in some ways trashing him. And he's like, well, is it true? Is this Batman this nightmare? And I love that it's this statement on media spin, because one article's showing him a nightmare. The other one is an honest man who has to hide his face. And, it's trying to pin down what's truth and what's fiction in these pieces that are so driven not by fact, but by personal take on a situation. I loved how this one played out, and it was really, really neat to see this exploration of Batman where this is somebody who had to come at it from complete media exposure. And what he was gradually unfolding over times, and that we got to see him reconnect with a friend in his exploration of that years later, before finally encountering Batman for the first time and really seeing him in person, getting an idea of who this man really was. I just loved the journey that we went on, where what he was seeing in media was not matching what he was hoping the character would be.
Oh, big time. And one of the neat things about this whole about this story was, just again, as you said, it was that personalization, the politicalization, because he was living in Russia where there was, it was during the time when there was that media kind of blackout. So he was only getting pieces here, and then eventually gets some Gotham stories, and eventually gets from his friends some other newspaper clippings. And he kind of turned Batman as the motivation for him to write the political pieces. Those were some really cool stuff going on. And that was something I really liked about how, you could see how Batman could inspire people to go beyond and do things. We always talk about Superman being that great inspiration. Dun, dun, dun. Well, the Bat was this guy's inspiration to stand up to the oppression. The Bat was his inspiration to create these heroes that, would, these political cartoons and, this political thing to help his people rise up. And I loved seeing that, and especially loved seeing all the different eras of the Bat, kind of that he lived through, but he was on the Iron Curtain, so he was kind of limited on what he could see. It was so cool seeing somebody who wasn't from Gotham, somebody who wasn't really get to know who the Bat is.
So speaking of favorite stories, because it's really hard out of this, because I'll jump from that one saying that's one of my favorites, because he had that endearing part at the end where he was going to give his daughter the Batman pen, and instead she'd already adopted Wonder Woman as her connected character. It was cool to see that, that the cycle would begin again now with a different hero. This story from Turkey with the cradle. I love a story where you're following along with the mystery and not really seeing where it's going to go. It was fun seeing him jet set around the world, following clues, using his team to kind of guide him. But the end result winds up being a story that ties back to the Court of Owls and introduces this concept that, well, Court of Owls operates in Gotham. Who said that was the only court?
Yep.
And that idea was like mind blowing. That I never, when these two girls came in, I never thought there was going to be a Court of Owls connection. I clearly was connecting them with the thumb drives, but I didn't realize that like there was going to be this link to the Court of Owls, that it was the Court of Eagles, and Batman ending off at the end with something that this can be a throwaway or can be deeply connected, because you could explore now this idea that, well, worldwide, how many courts are there out there?
Yeah.
And what are they doing? And to see Batman's eyes go wide at that concept was something that really stood out for me. I thought it was a great action story, because I thought these two eagles that were introduced, the fact that he was Dawn and Dusk, I think it was.
Yeah.
These two were like really competent opponents. And I loved their use of tech and their obvious martial arts skills, and acrobatic skills being a way that they would fight and combat Batman. They were very colorful, very interesting. I would love to see them again, get an idea of how big this court really is. That was another one where sequel, maybe not the right word. I'd like to see another story, like another expansive story where Batman learns more about some other courts that are out there, because that concept really stood out for me.
Oh, big time. I'd love, again, as I said earlier, I'd love Batman The World Part 2. This is another story where I think this would be wonderful to continue on with the Court of Eagles, or even what other courts are out there. You know, and that for me is, again, it was a great detective story being told. You know, just showing Batman, in his strategery and whatnot, his finding and figuring out what is going on. You love good detective stories, but again, it's another one that doesn't have a completely clean Batman's a good guy, he wins, yay.
Yeah.
No, there's still more out there. And I love when you get those kind of stories, especially with people like the courts, owls, eagles, or any other of the various countries that may have different, birds of prey, courts of different birds of prey. So there's so much they could do with that, and you love seeing a creative team come up with a concept and come up with something that would work like that. So this is another one of those stories. Yes, we can continue on. We can give us more courts of eagles. You can give us more courts of other countries. So it's a really neat concept and a really cool, usage of other creative ideas within the Bat universe.
Some unique stories I remember of growing up were Batman stories where Batman was almost more like the Phantom Stranger or the Watcher, but what was unique about it is Batman would have some interactions, but the story itself that was going on was one where Batman was almost recounting it or narrating it or guiding you through it versus being the one in the center of all the action. That kind of added that detective feel to it, if it makes any sense. And sometimes they would occur in Batman Family Giant or things like that, where at the end, to your point, this wasn't a story about Batman being the winner or the loser. It was an introduction to something, or an introduction of a concept that then could lead to something else later, or maybe it just doesn't. It just leaves you thinking. And that story embraced that, and I really loved that. I don't know if this is something we'll ever see again. And if we don't, that's okay. If we do, I want to read it. So it's neat when you have stories like that. Story in Poland was a cool one, because you get this idea of this technology that is Big Brother kind of watching you, that was supposed to create this great peace. And her idea of, I don't want to get connected with Wayne Tech. You can't spend enough money to make me want to be a part of this. I want to be independent. We've got things under control. And she has very strong feelings about Batman early on. Yes. Until Batman saves her and she realizes, well, maybe things aren't because their system isn't fully integrated, fully in place. So she's going to a place now where she's relying on, we don't have ourselves completely spread out to this area. I'm going to go mobile, kind of recount things from there and be Big Brother on site. And it backfires on her horribly. that partnership leads to this greater expansion, hopefully trying to make both places safe. And I really do see how like Bruce would jet set around the world to find things that not only would help Gotham, but would be able to help other places. That was what Wayne Tech was. It's why, I'm going to say it, I'm loving what they're doing right now with Lucius Fox and where that's going. And I'm not anti Lucius Fox having money or I Am Batman, because I love those books, or that exploration. So I'm not even saying I want that to end, but eventually I want this Bruce Wayne back.
Yes.
And I'm happy to go on the journey, and it doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of thing, because I like Jace. I like his story. That isn't a statement on me going, well, do you not like Jace then? No, I love that. It's kind of like what I felt with Azrael. Like, I wanted to keep following Azrael after Asbats ended. I don't know that I'm against Jace continuing to be a Batman and kind of going that route, because I'm not. I like him. But there's something about seeing this type of thing with Bruce. I don't want it to just be instantly, though, light switch. Bruce has got money again. Take me through the journey. Get me to this point where we can get this kind of story again, because I love this. This was a great, great story and made a ton of sense in what she was doing. Another story where the story isn't all about Batman. It was fun getting to know her and what drives her, and what you got to care about, like that tech and what it can potentially do, in order to feel like at the end, this is a satisfying conclusion. This is a signature that means something.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I loved about this is the opening. You know, where Bruce is talking to Alfred, and he's like, it's an 800-year-old city, but was rebuilt from scratch a few decades ago. It's modern, but at the same time, the city remembers its past. And that notion, I'll tell you, every time I go to Italy, I'm always struck with that same kind of feeling. It's one of the things I love about visiting, my brother over there, because you see, like, the church right by him was, it's from BC. So it's, it was like 9 BC is when it was built. And then right next to that, you've got a completely modern gelato shop, and like, how do you have this right here? And when you go, even when, like when you go into Venice, when you go into Rome, or you go into, Florence, you see these classic, traditional, old things. Right next to it is like a McDonald's, or right next to it is a modern building. And you see just that beautiful blend of tradition and modern. And it's something that I absolutely love about, being over there. And I'm so glad that it's kind of the capturing in this story. And it's not even just that visual, but it is also, you think back to her and her company, because that's kind of how her mindset is. She is, has that protection of the tradition and classic, but she is branching out into the modern to protect what was. So it was kind of a neat statement that how she really is connected with her country, how she is like, Bruce's analogy of Poland. It was a really cool moment that you can kind of get, his groove and understand his vibe. This wasn't just about this really cool tech that Bruce wanted. Because, yes, he did want that, but also he understands where she's coming from. He understands who she is and why she's so protective of this. This wasn't just a moneymaker for Bruce. This wasn't just something to help with the bat. This was about understanding where she's coming from. And that, for me, is the neat connection that you see with her and Bruce, her and the bat.
The Mexico story, the ghost story, was really cool.
Oh, yeah.
And the art style, very, very unique compared to all the other pieces in there. And I really enjoy that aspect of it, where you've got these unique art styles. This one was like, whoa, okay, this is a very different take. Yeah. And this ghost story where he's being followed and actually being spoken to by this spirit that has never been able to rest. And she's seeking justice for another female who was murdered by her husband. And really enjoyed the unfolding mystery where Batman goes and does this thing where he's like, I know Gotham backwards and forwards. I know this place. I've seen the maps. I have a good idea on the layout and things like that. But he wouldn't have reached the door in my city. I would have been there first. but it's good for him to run a little. So he's like sitting here recognizing the limitations of the place. I loved that dialogue exploration because it's important to talk about the difference between knowing your home turf like the back of your hand and being in a place where I've got a rudimentary understanding of this place. I can navigate. He's not going to get away from me, but it's not going to be as quick and clean as it would be in Gotham because I don't know this place. I don't know every nook and cranny, every shortcut, every way to make that appearance. This idea that I'm there before you when really it's only because I'm taking advantage of logistics it's this idea of the showmanship of Batman, right? I loved that. I'm like, what a very cool idea to put into this story. Makes this one unique because it's giving us just a different take on what Batman has to do when he's in new locations, not just out of the U.S., but in the U.S. He runs into this same problem. I love that.
Oh, big time. Yeah, and I'll tell you, you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about this art change. And this was a glaring art style that popped. That so fit the story being told. But some of the stuff I absolutely loved is when he is Bruce Wayne and he's in the car and he's like, stop the car. And just that moment where they cast the shadow over half his face. So it's kind of like you can see Bruce Wayne is going into bat mode. And that was something I was like, man, that is a cool effect there. And then, again, everybody's take on the costume has been wonderful. And I love just this look. It has that sleekness to it, but it still has a lot of that functionality that we really enjoy. Kind of like the armorizing of his arms and his hands and just the cape styling. This was just an absolutely beautiful book. My art read-through on this story was just a sheer joy.
Yeah, and I like that the story didn't just end with him taking care of the girl, the 23-year-old who was killed by her husband, but he completely followed it through and found the bones of this girl that was haunted. In the end, you see like the two of them, where she's like, some justice was done for her and me today, but maybe I will find justice for the rest of our sisters after all. And this idea of justice, and that there are these stories where these people have this idea that people stay with us because their story was never really ended, and it was this violent ending that is aching for justice. I've always liked that exploration when you get to see that type of thing, and it was cool that this story was kind of covering that.
Yeah, and you I loved seeing Bruce take off the cape and cowl, drape it over her bones, and even takes a knee, and like this will have to be her funeral, and you see him, kind of like giving her the proper burial she deserves, or to the best of his ability. But it was a really neat moment with Bruce because you don't always get a religious side of Bruce, but you always do get that respect and just that desire for justice. This was a really neat kind of moment.
What do you think of this story from Brazil?
Oh God, yeah, heck yeah. It's one of those neat things where I love how every story has a little bit of twist to it. Everybody has its own thing, but every story was really good.
Yeah, and I liked this was an exploration of talking about the relationship with Batman and Lucius Fox.
Yep.
Lucius has to be the public face of Wayne Enterprises on this because Batman is using that as a way to gain information while he's doing the Batman investigation. He can't be Bruce Wayne and Lucius at the same, in the role that Lucius is filling at the same time. So I really liked that this story was exploring both of those pieces and their relationships. And it stood out really, really well for me on that. Because in the end, Batman's investigating this and investigating, again, some like injustices that are going on in this place. And that relationship and partnership is always as important to me as the one with him and Alfred. Lucius is a very different role in acting as the agent of Wayne Enterprises. I'm wondering if we're going to see that kind of relationship between him and Jace, meaning Lucius and Jace, or if that's something that will eventually get back with Bruce and Lucius. I don't know. But I really enjoyed this story because, again, it's another era of Batman that's represented in this story. And again, this idea of exploring a different place. And that in that exploration of a different place, Bruce has to react and behave differently in order to be able to compensate for the fact that it's not Gotham.
Well, and one of the things that always makes me wonder, because seeing, again, as you said, seeing this role of, Lucius and Bruce, what if in the future we get kind of Jace is Batman and Bruce is taking on the Lucius role, where he is actually kind of in more of the corporate face. We see Bruce Wayne take back over Wayne Enterprises, and instead of pushing it back on Lucius Fox, he continues that role and he lets Jace be the Bat. Granted, Bruce can never really let go of the Bat, because we see that in Batman Beyond, where he's there with that Batman. But could we maybe see Batman kind of in a supporting role for the other Bat? Yeah, I think that'd be kind of an interesting story to tell, because this story kind of got me thinking that way, to be honest with you. Seeing just, again, the Lucius Fox role, with Batman is a great role, but in the future, maybe we'll see Bruce Wayne.
Isn't that Batman Beyond, though?
Yeah, but maybe we would see Batman Beyond under the modern era, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm not against that. I wouldn't mind seeing that be a story set in the future. I'm not ready to see Bruce
hang up the cowl. Yeah, me neither. But it's something. It was something about this story that got that going on in my head. I think it was because seeing Bruce and Lucius working together, and I just kept thinking, Jace, we could substitute that, and that'd be kind of a neat story as to, because Lucius is not supporting the vigilante flat out. He really is anti-Bat now. He's kind of drinking the Kool-Aid of that Bruce is maybe doing more bad than good. So I can see him not wanting his son to continue on under the cowl. So maybe we would need somebody else. That's where my brain got thinking.
Sure. And that part, when you put it that way, I'm like, that's a really interesting exploration. And it's the part where I'm torn, because when you talk about future, what I love about Batman Beyond, that was the future. So this idea of future state being now, that like happening now and gradually shifting to that, I'm like, I don't want that yet. But
I know.
But yet I want the story you're saying. I want both. I'm greedy. So it's so like I love everything you're saying. So I'm finding myself nodding as you're saying this and being like, everything Jim is laying out is a great idea. Like, I want to read that. Like, I just don't want to give up Bruce now. I'm having such trouble letting go.
Yeah. But one of the neat things about the Brazil piece, though, because that's where my mind went, but I did like the fact that, it does end with not just with Batman saving the day. Batman puts the fear of the Bat in the corrupt politician.
Yep.
But he even says, in the end, no Cape gods are coming to save these people. The true heroes are those who struggle to provide conditions and opportunities for those who do not have them. And it is that whole unsung hero, that is in modern society that we need. The teachers, the honest law officers, just the everyday people who are struggling to help somebody who is less fortunate than them. And that for me was kind of a really neat statement to end this story.
This next story from South Korea was really cool, because I love when you get these like new tech suits of Batman. But here's the thing. What happens when you can't trust the person that's created the tech? Like, they've got their own agenda. And she's talking about, right from the get-go, she's laying out this idea of Saba and I owe this debt to my brother. And we get to see Batman first, and this is a smart move. He activates the tech of this combat mode. Everything turns black and white, and you get this great action sequence with this super cool suit. I was glad they took advantage of that opportunity before Batman went and fought Saba, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sabu. I'm thinking of the ECW guy. No, and there's some links to Saba. But seeing this Saba, I love these kind of fights where you gave us a good, meaty fight with Saba. Batman looked like he was ready to win, and then she overrode the suit because she's like, my brother was like another nameless criminal to you, wasn't he? well, look what this did to him, and look how he died because of this. And this is the chance where Bruce is like explaining what you think you saw isn't what happened. And he's explaining the situation, and she has to sit there and go, the fear gas, so it wasn't you. And she's ready to pull the trigger and realizes her mistake and has to like rethink the whole situation. I loved the story arc here. They give us a nice meaty story arc of her journey from revenge to realizing I am pointing the gun at the wrong person and not really taking into account what actually happened here. And he lets her go. Like he understands where she came from. And literally in the end, like basically agrees to like understand what she was going through and that she came out the other side. Is that how you read that at the end? Like he's just kind of like, we're cool.
Yeah, we're good. She's going to destroy and disable everything that she learned from the synchronization. And he's letting her go because he understands where she was coming from. She wasn't a true villain, and she wasn't going to be a continuing problem. I completely read it the same way, and I think he's keeping the suit, and he's probably going to bad eyes it. And this is something that he could even modify and we could tweak on later because the suit did make him stronger. The suit did, for all we know, this could be the beginning of the tech that he uses to make Batman Beyond suit.
Yeah. All right. China, Batman and Panda Girl. This was great because it was a fun story.
Yes.
And I love the suit. The Batman suit, that samurai-style suit, wicked cool. I loved the idea of these restaurants that Wayne Enterprises, it's an example of your company being so big and having a worldwide reach where you're not necessarily directly in tune with what's going on. People are being forced out of their businesses to make space for quote-unquote progress. And sometimes when you're at the ground level and then you're at this restaurant and being like, well, I really enjoyed this experience and things like that, and you're recognizing, oh my gosh, this isn't going to be here tomorrow and I'm responsible for this. Even though he wasn't, I'm responsible for this because, you can't micromanage every aspect of your company. But he now has a very different take on this. Make sure that this place can reopen. And I loved the arc. Because just a great action sequence. That page where it's like, crah, and you see Batman throwing the batarangs in that suit. Oh my gosh, I would love to read more of Samurai Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, I definitely, this is a cool look. And again, it's that whole personalizing the Bat costume for the region he's in. Mm-hmm. We always talk about how Bruce has different costumes. Well, that was a neat look to it, and did he need to do that? No. The traditional Bat costume would have worked just fine here and it would have looked just as cool, but I liked this artist rendition. And I liked her with, putting on her Robin costume.
Yep.
And even, led up to she is, studies martial arts. She's, gymnastics, all that kind of stuff going on there. So, seeing her kick some butt right along with Bruce, that was a cool fight.
It was a fun story. Without it being a silly story. There's a difference between the two. Like, I really enjoyed, like, the action was sweet, and it was, she was a fun character. Like, I would love to see them team up again. I really enjoyed that relationship, and would love to see, their opportunity for that arc to be followed a little bit more. That's another one where we talk about sequels or continuations. I'm like, I liked her. I liked them together, and I liked the idea of the exploration of Batman learning more about that culture. And that was fun. I mean, it was really a cool one. Talk about proper placement. This was the right story to end with, Batman Unchained.
Yeah.
Go to the Japanese piece. It's in black and white. It's, got this manga style to it. And I love manga. This was a great way to wrap up at the end. Because it was a really great story. I love the art style of it. Very different from the piece at the beginning. When you're talking about a worldwide exploration. Talk about another take on the Batsuit, too, where the mask is more, it's got the teeth and that different sort of look to it. Really enjoyed that take on this scenario. But I love how even the panels and the way you follow through the story feels very manga in its presentation. I'm currently reading the Bat manga because they have collected editions of that, and I've been making my way through it. And not because of this, I was already doing it. And it was funny when I jumped into this, I'm like, well, that's what I'm liking about that. It's a different storytelling style and presentation. Very rich, very, very dramatic in its presentation. It's something that's different. It's something I love about comics, where you can get comics from a different region. They're exploring characters and concepts that we love in a very unique way. But yet, this still felt very Batman, even though you've got that different style. What was your take on this one?
Well, one of the things, again, everything you were saying, I'm echoing right along with you with the style, the art style, and a great choice for the ending. But the thing I loved is we have this artist who's getting in trouble for drawing pictures of the Bat.
Yes.
It's drawing the unsanctioned pictures and this and that. And when he does actually meet Batman, Batman says, hey, I'll help you, but you have to stop drawing pictures of me. One, you're going to get arrested. Two, you're making people think I'm a hero, and that's not true. I'm not doing this for praise. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. And I love just that moment that artist is like, no, I don't need your help. I'm going to do this on my own then, because you as an ideality is more important than what you think. And I love that moment where he's going and the guy's not going to make it. And then Bat's like, okay, you're right. Maybe maybe you got it. You win. And it was just that really cool moment of this guy who, it's again that stick to your guns, know where you're going to go and know who you are, what you're going to do. And it was just a great moment, a great interchange between the two of them.
Yeah. And this idea that Batman, no matter what you say, you're a true hero. And what a hero is not necessarily what you're trying to be. It's what just comes naturally out of it. And I really, really loved that at the end. It was, and talk about a different kind of take, a different kind of story. Really, really cool at the end. I did like paging through at the end the concept sketches, because there was only a couple pages of them, but it was nice to see them. That's why I feel like there is an expanded edition with maybe more of the behind the scenes stuff that we could see. For like an absolute or a tabletop book or something like that out of this.
Yes.
This was really, as an experience, I have a hard time if I were to go back right now and tell you my favorite stories. I guarantee you if I did a reread, they would change. And I say that as a compliment to this piece.
Yes.
Because I feel like this is something that very much is mood-oriented. The coffee table book piece is interesting. I almost want that. I don't want to say more than an absolute, but in companion to an absolute. Because there's a difference between the layout and format of a coffee table book. This is something I'd love to leave out for when I have guests over. And it having extra stuff in it, like concept sketches and things that would be a page turner, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think this could be easily reworked as a proper coffee table book with some background stories and things that we wouldn't normally get to see. And I mean, you could put the current hardcover out for that same purpose, but you know what I mean? It's a little bit of a different layout of the book, and there's something to it. And I think this would work really well as that piece because it's so unique that I think it would be good for people who are casual fans to kind of page through this and see it. So I'm one that would say I would buy that in an instant if you want to put it together and publish it. And I think the work is worth it. This was great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm 100% in on oversized absolutes. Any other version they want to give me, I'm jumping on it. And as I said at the beginning, the U.S. story, the France and Germany were my top three, and none of them were bad. All of them were wonderful. The only reason those three stood out the most for me was because, again, I love that Bruce declaration to the world, I'm coming for you. Yeah. And I love just the France using the magic lasso to get Bruce to admit that, yes, I love you with all my heart and will until the day I die. I loved seeing Selena run Wonder Woman that way. And Germany that was really the story. I'm like, I want part 2 of this story. I 100% want to see the female Joker do some, well, not the female, the German Joker. I want to see more stories with her. I want to see more stories with her. And then I want to see a German Batman rise up to fight her. I really want to see that story continue. So that's the only reason why those 3 are on the top of my list in this. But all of these things were absolutely amazing. And I loved how, again, they tackled different ideologies. And I said, each one of these really could be the modern Batman. This could be our modern, the Japan one was back in time, and, the Czech Republic one was also a little bit back in time. So you'd have some difficulties. But again, truth be told, this very easily could be Bruce Wayne. I think that, for me, was a real treat on this, that it wasn't just an absolute Elseworld, completely changed. No, this was Bruce Wayne fitting into this mold, so it was kind of neat.
This is something where, in the last year we had a lot of worries and fears about the state of DC, just because you see changes behind the scenes with, management and editors and things like that at DC being let go, and you wonder what that means for the company. Are we going to get less depth? And I think that's what we worry about as fans. I always worry about when people who have delivered for us lose their jobs, and I genuinely mean that. I want to see where they land, want to see them successful, and be able to support them. You get worried about comics being a creative medium and making noise. And I hope this is something that not only made noise, but that people followed that noise and actually jumped on and gave this book a chance. Because that's something that comics need. Anything that is drawing people to comics that is quality helps people to maybe see them in a different light. I like that they delivered this a wide variety of different ways. They had faith in this as a project, and they're like, well, let's put this on DC Universe Infinite. Let's put this digitally. Let's put this hardcover. Let's make this available in a wide variety of different ways. And right around Batman Day, make this exciting thing that's coming out. And they did that quality podcast that they put out, which was cool as well. I love that they're doing stuff like this and experimenting and still making noise. It's really, really critical for comics right now for that to happen. And from a positive standpoint of what are some positive things going on in comics, it's any of this kind of stuff that's going on, not just at DC, across the board, where people are doing things to try and bring notice to comics. And I hope this was successful on some level of just generating some buzz where people maybe are taking... what I'm hoping? This got some people into comic shops.
Yeah.
And browsing around, because you don't want them just picking up this. You want them picking up this and a couple other items, trying some things out, and I hope that this leads to that.
Look at those strange little beetles. They look... Great neutron!
How you doing, Sean? Again, this is Ron Zoo. We had a very good discussion on Batman 89 and Superman Batman 89. Both books was amazing. Jim said he would like those books to stay at miniseries. I agree with him. You can get a casual reader to get into these types of books, and most people get intimidated when they see an ongoing book, when they see 500 issues of a book. We didn't do that in the old days mostly, but nowadays people just say they don't know where to start. Our next subject is what to do about these apps. As you guys know, Amazon is going to be taking Comixology, I guess, their name off, so it's going to be the Amazon Books or something like that. So a lot of people is worried about what's going to happen. I think the service will still stay around, but we have had casualties. Mayfire is gone, the Image app is gone, so we've had some casualties. But I buy the app for miniseries because I'm running out of space. I have 157 loan boxes, and I don't know what to do with all these miniseries. So I said I'll get the app to read the Golden Age and Silver Age books and to read the miniseries. Some miniseries are so good, like Batman 89 and Superman 89, you have to buy them in floppy form. The Milestone books also, I have to buy those in floppy, digital, and I will get the trades on those books just for support. But I wish DC will put more Golden Age books on their app and Marvel, because that's what I would want to read, because those books are accessible to most people, and DC is no longer doing archives. So I wish they just put more golden age on these apps. The next subject is about the lifespan of these apps. I don't think these apps are going anywhere because if you take the Marvel and DC apps combined, you have over 60,000 books to read with more expansions every day. And in 3 months, you can read everything that comes out. Marvel releases a weekly list every Monday. Recently, they just changed the app into this upgraded. So now, I don't know if it still does that, but it was. And I used to enjoy that because the books that I don't buy every Monday, they would be on that new list. So that was a good idea. And DC also has a new weekly list of newer books from 3 months ago that's hot, like some of the Black Label stuff that I don't buy because of just, like I said, space and the size difference. Even though I did buy the Superman versus Lobo, because the Superman versus Lobo, you have to have that type of stuff. But these apps is not going anywhere because this is going to probably be the way they keep publishing if they ever stop paper. So let's hope they never stop paper, but it's a possibility. If these suits see there's not any money in it, this could come to an end. Let's hope it doesn't, but digital may be what's going on. And I was not a proponent of digital comics when they first came out. I said I would never read a digital comic, but it's accessibility for a digital comic. Like now with the pandemic, I was missing a couple of books. So I had to read the digital versions to keep up with the ongoing story. So digital has its place, and I've accepted it now. And it's just certain books, though, you want to read, you want to hold it. Like a book like Bone or Long Book and Club, you want to hold that in your hand. You don't want to read that digitally. But, a regular book that comes out every, Wednesday, I can take it reading it digitally, especially when you can read it on a bigger screen and flip it and make it flip around. I think with the ability of digital to letting the guy to read on a bigger screen, to stretch the picture out, flip it around, I think it's awesome. And I think, if you got some kids to get into it, start them from little, I think we can go into a new market. And like you guys are saying, we need some guys who are readers. The only thing that's holding the industry together is us old heads. And we ain't going to be around. We're not going to be allowed around for long. So we got to do something with some casual readers. So that's why, like Jim said earlier, we need mini pages, hot stuff. They probably need to start doing stuff from movies and TV shows just to try something. The DC with the Batman and Superman 89, that might bring some older heads back. Let's hope that happens because we need some more casual readers. We need some older guys that's been grown up with the industry to come back. And we need books that don't have to be everything should not be made for the trade. I know that's where they're going, but I think that's what's actually hindering the industry, right, for the trade all the time, But I'm going to read this stuff anyway. You guys keep on raising, keep making these great podcasts, and I'll keep on listening. You guys have a pleasant day.
He touches on some interesting points. One of the interesting pieces is the switch from Comixology to Amazon Books. I didn't know that was coming, actually. When he mentioned it, that was the first I'd heard of that. I don't know that matters. I think Amazon is not going to cancel this. I don't see that being a thing because it's an opportunity for Amazon to distribute as long as there's money in it. I think the name change is anything. They bought Comixology, and now Comixology, instead of Comixology being an Amazon company, it's just going to be Amazon. I'm not overly shocked by that. Them wanting to go, at this point, we just want people to know this is Amazon.
Right.
That's how I'm taking that versus it being the sky is falling. Do you agree, or where are you at on that?
No, I'm pretty cool on that. I think that everything you're saying, I am 100% agreeing with you. It's always been, because you think about it, it's Comixology and Amazon company. Right there on the main page, you see it. So, and when I log in, I'm using my login. So that's all the same, and I don't think things are going to change because it's making them money, and they're going to continue on with this. The only thing I do kind of wonder about are, because I love using Comixology for the indie titles, because there's a couple out there, non-DC, non-Marvel, just, like, as I say, they have that recommended for you. And sometimes I click on that and I start looking through that, and some of it's kind of interesting and I try it. Other times I read and I say, what are you thinking about me that you would recommend this story for me? Those are the only ones that I hope I don't want to lose those things, but Amazon's been running this company for how long now? So I'm seeing it just as a name change. So I don't see that stuff going away, but it's one of those things. That's where I'm wondering, are we going to keep getting some of those really neat stuff?
Because you do get book recommendations and things. What I'm hoping is either that this doesn't get absorbed into the Kindle app, or that the Kindle app undergoes an overhaul that it allows for a section that does what you're talking about. Right. I like the functionality of Comixology right now. I'm not against them expanding it and somehow enhancing it for, making sure that they're putting all of their development into, maybe a Singleton app or things like that. That's fine. I just want to be able to get my stuff in a way that's easy, convenient, and makes sense for comic book delivery versus traditional novels. I'm buying them all through Amazon. That's we've been doing that. I mean, that shift over changed a while ago, where it kind of shifted to Amazon payments and things like that. And so I'm like, okay, this is fine, not a big deal. I just hope that they continue to make it easy for comic book readers. What I'm hoping is maybe that embracing of it makes it easier for people to find recommendations of this kind of material in Amazon.
Right.
So then you're getting a different audience that's reading it. And if that happens out of it, that's a cool thing. I hope in the end, I don't know logistically behind the scenes how lucrative this is for comic companies and creators. The digital end, I'm still not clear on that. I'm hoping it is. That it's a delivery method that is giving them profitability and that they are able to continue making new product from it, because I like that as a delivery method. I also want to see continued opportunity. I don't want to see paper go away. And he mentions an interesting point there where he's talking about money. It's the magic piece over that. If we as readers don't want comic shops to go away, we need to go to comic shops. I still frequent comic shops. I admit that my visits to comic shops are different than they were before, in the sense that how I purchase from comic shops are different. But I love supporting comic shops. I love going in. I love supporting them. I like buying swag. I like buying statues. I like buying collected editions. I love going in and browsing. It's a different sort of method than before. DCB Service that we shop through. I shop from them every month still. I shop from them. And really, I spend the same amount each month that I always have. It's just different. My dollars are different now. My collection's different than it was before. How I collect physically versus digitally. And I like the variety. I think there's a lot more variety, a lot more product available to us. I love, though, that for somebody that's like, I like paper single issues. That's how I like to explore. I want all my collection to be that. Go for it. And so the best way to do that is to continue supporting that. If you keep supporting that, if your friends who collect exclusively that way keep supporting that, those of us that do hybrid, because I still love single. There's certain books I love having as singles. I want that collection to keep continuing. There's certain books where I like them digitally. There's certain books where I like to buy them digitally in singles, but then get like the cool collected editions, like the omnibuses or absolute editions, or sometimes these deluxe editions that they make. I like those in a physical product. It's as long as we keep supporting paper, there will continue to be paper. Because there's profitability in it. And that's the piece where sometimes it seems like the bad thing to say, that we want money being made from this. No, we want money being made from this. Yes. It's an important, critical part to this piece. That's not a dirty part to it. Companies need to make money. That ultimately is good for the creators, in the sense that the more money that the company is making, the more negotiating power creators have. If the company is not doing as well profitability-wise, or the division, I should say, is not doing as well profitability-wise, they're less of a voice. And I do think, though, that your big powerhouses behind the scenes, some of them at least, have to be recognizing you're pulling all your TV shows and movies from this. So you want more. You want new stuff. So I'm hoping these subscription services are finding ways or continuing to evolve where they're profitable eventually for the division, profitable eventually for the creators. And I say eventually, I don't know what that looks like. I don't I don't know that it is now. I don't know that it's infancy-wise that it's gotten there. I don't know. I just want it to get there. I want there to be a profit for the people that are creating these products, the creators, because that keeps the creators coming to this as a career choice. And we need that. We need the strong, terrific creators that are... Batman the World's a great example of this. Look at the diversity of product that was available there. Diversity of story, diversity of emotion, diversity of presentation. That's what comics are all about. I mentioned Star Wars Visions earlier in this, and whether it's your cup of tea or not, the thing I loved about it is every episode of that's an exploration. It's kind of like this. And I think there are audiences where it's like, hey, if you like Star Wars Visions, you a Batman fan, you should pick up Batman the World. You know what I mean? Because I think there's an audience there that can... Disney Plus is doing a lot of these kind of experimental shorts and things like that. And, oh my gosh, that audience all should be reading Batman the World. Because it's the same concept of let's play with this and deliver things that are of top quality. So it's nice to see it. The made for the trade thing is an interesting concept because I get what he's saying in the sense that it sometimes limits the kind of stories you can tell. But I do think we're getting some creators like the recent Flash run that was really long, getting to see. And I mean, Flash has, I think, enjoyed this through multiple creators where they haven't just had, they can do a trade arc, so to speak, but that arc's actually building to the next arc, the arc afterwards, or maybe planting seeds for 3 arcs down the line. And I think that's how you get around that. It's giving creators a long enough run that they can tell stories that have a larger build to them. I think we're seeing that with the Batman creators recently who have been on there as well, where we're getting that piece. We've seen that in the Superman stories, right? That they've been building towards bigger arcs. And I think that's really important that you're doing that in books more and more. Justice League has had that. We just talked about that recently, and I think that's a book that's doing the same thing. So I think you can tell stories in trade arcs, but then do it what you're looking for in the sense that not losing this idea of ongoing storytelling, which is pretty critical. Because if it is just arc to arc without any form of connecting threads or with very shallow connecting threads, it is hard to pull people along. So I think that's important. I am sad that these Golden Age hardcovers, not only, like, this is where there's something wrong with me. I buy them again on Comixology. And they haven't been re-releasing all of them on Comixology now. That's stalled as well. I loved the Golden Age hardcovers because I think that Golden Age material for me, give me a big meaty batch of them. So who's not buying these?
I don't know. I'm with you. I love those things. So it's one of the things that I'm more heavy reading on Izilla. So I'm more heavy reading digital. There's some stuff that it fits better in page. And those kind of collected things fit better a physical book in front of you. So it's, I don't know, man. I'm with you on that.
I really, here's the funny part when I say there's something wrong with me. I'm kind of joking because I guarantee you listening to this podcast right now are people who are nodding along with me. Maybe not the same books, but there's people nodding along that are going, no, Sean, I'm with you. I rebuy this. You rebuy this character or this team or this creator. I rebuy this. We all do it. It just looks differently based on our budget and our interest. We're that audience that does it. So I'm shocked when I see these things that are vanishing that I think were good collections. But to his point, then we need them digitally. I'm a big fan of comic book history. I like reading older stuff as well as newer stuff, and I want it to be there. The big problem that we have is in my lifetime, as long as new product keeps getting published, I'm never going to be able to read everything I want to read. I like that problem. I know it's a strange thing to say, but I never want to hit the point where I'm like, oh my gosh, I've read everything. What do I do now? I can go back and reread because it's so much of it. But I don't ever want to get to that point because I want there to be too much. Because based on mood, when I'm sitting there going, oh, I want to read this character now, there's a smorgasbord of stuff I haven't read. Where I'm like, I just kind of want to read something contemporary and new and edgy and that type of thing. Or I want to go into the past and see how we got here and appreciate this creator that somebody was just talking about. I like that variety, and I want too much. Very much like streaming services nowadays, right? I'm looking at, you got to be in the same boat I'm in. Our television looks a little different. And I know that, but we got to have the same problem. there's too much stuff. Like, we're never able to fully get to all the things that we want to view. I think that's a good problem because it means that we're never bored. Gaming's the same thing for me. You know, all my hobbies, like, I've got stockpiles. I've learned that stockpiles I used to be bothered by stockpiles. Now it's the opposite. I'm like, bring them on. I want more piles. Piles are fine because it just means that whatever my mood is, I've got a menu to choose from. And I like the menu. So comic books become like a streaming service in my mentality and how I approach them. It's great because I've got a lot of stuff that I want to read both in DC and outside of DC that, quite frankly, I'm never going to get caught up on. I'm just not. I would have to quit my job now and do nothing but read all day long, which sounds like heaven. It's not going to happen. But I like that we have these things available. I hope with these new streaming services, like he mentioned Marvel's and DC's unlimited streaming services that are out there, that these are making money and somehow trickling back down to creators and really, on some level, making some sort of profit. Because what I don't want is us to hit a point where we're not getting new product in comic shops. We're not getting new product digitally because of the fact that it's no longer profitable. Profitability is the buzzword. We really need that to happen in comics. Stuff like this, Batman the World helps. It really does. I mean, it made some noise. Whether it was a big buzz or medium-sized buzz, whatever, it did get attention. I love seeing anything that gets attention. That's all good news. I don't know how it translated into dollars. Hard right now for things sometimes to translate into dollars the way that you wanted it to, but I hope it was a worthwhile endeavor, that it generated enough dollars that they will do more projects like this, because this is the kind of thing we need as fans.
Now I can get out of here.
We'd like to remind everyone about our show voicemail line, where you can call in like our longtime friend of the show, Russell, did. It's 1-440-388-4434, or Dr. Norge on Skype. RagingBullets@gmail.com is our email address if you prefer to contact us via that method. We love having you part of the show. RagingBullets.com is our show website. That's where you're going to find news on new episodes as they're released, and all of our old episodes can be found there. It feeds into Twitter. It also feeds into our Facebook fan page. You can also find us a part of a wonderful Facebook group community, and I want to thank everyone who posts there. It's every time I pop in there, there's just like new news, announcements, reactions to things that are going on through all of comics and pop culture. And we're seeing more people shouting out blogs and posts and things that they've read. I really appreciate that. So I want to shout out everybody who posts there, because I go there to find out news first and foremost, because I know that the people there are upbeat and fun and safe, and that's what I'm looking for right now. I want to just enjoy this hobby. So I want to thank everyone for that. The About Us section of the show website links to where you can find us on social media and gaming systems and things like that. Great way to connect with us there. We just love connecting with all of you. Sponsoring this episode is, of course, DCB Service and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what's going on over at DCB Service?
We have the Robin Annual #1, 40% off, only $3.59. We've got the parts 1 and 2 of the 3-part miniseries written by Jeff Lemire, Robin and Batman, also 40% off, only $3.59. And we've got the 6-issue, part 1 of the 6-issue Robins, written by Tim Silly, 40% off, only $2.39. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, that's where you're going to find Batman Little Gotham Calendar Days. $9.99 regularly, 42% off, only $5.79. Birds of Prey, Fighters by Trade, trade paperback, $24.99 regularly, 42% off, only $14.49. Highly recommend checking out both of those books. Thank you, DCB Service and InStockTrades.com, for continuing to support our show. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be back with a 2-episode exploration where we're going to be looking at Wonder Woman, Wonder Girl, Wonder Woman Black and Gold, and we're going to drop in there Superman and the Authority. We want to check in with all those books. So that's what our lineup's going to be for the next 2 weeks. Then we're going to be doing a Batman Fear State check-in. So we will see you next week.
Bye.
All right, you guys. Are you ready to sing your song?
I'd say we are. Yeah, let's sing it now.
Okay, this should be fun. Now get ready for your cue. Okay, Sean?
Okay.
Okay, Jim? Jim? Jim!
Okay. Raging bullets come
Okay, fellas, get ready. That was very good, Sean.
Naturally.
Jim, you're a little flat there, so be careful. Jim?
Okay. Justice League and so much more. I still love Green Lantern Corps. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show. DC Comics are what we know. The Raging Bullet Show.
Excellent job, guys.
Let's sing it again. Yeah, let's sing it again.
No, that's enough. Let's not push it.
Push it? What is that? Yeah, what are you talking about?
No, I didn't mean anything by that.
I think
Sean,
it's right there.
Jim,
I don't know.
how long do you want the song to go?
Look, it's our production.